Good morning, everybody. How are you? Today's lesson is going to be for Thursday, April 23rd, and we are going to be covering pages 337 to 39. 337 through 339. So in today's shout out is going to be, trying to think, Soraya. I don't even remember who I've said already, but I should have been writing it down. If you haven't been called, send me a text and let me know. But today I'll do Soraya. Thank you, Soraya, for always doing your work and sending it to me. I really, really appreciate it. And so I already gave you the pages that we're going to talk about. Well, yesterday, I'm just going to do a little bit of review from yesterday. Yesterday we talked about World War II and the key events. Okay, so September 1939, Germany invades Poland. This is the start of the war. You remember Russia was on the eastern side, Germany was on the western side, and the Polish people fought as much as they could, but they couldn't, fight off both. So they were captured, and then May through June of 1940, Germany conquers most of Western Europe. And if you look at the map that's in your book, you can see all the places that Germany conquered. Now remember, as this war is happening, as the war is happening, but as all these in Europe, Japan is wreaking havoc on the Pacific, like in Asia. All right, too. So July 1940, Germany launches air attacks on Great Britain. September 1940, Germany, Italy, and Japan create the Axis powers. June 1941, Germany attacks Russia. And then, remember, they were on the same side. They were lying together. And so when Russia attacked Estonia, you remember, Germany went to attack Russia. And you remember why they wanted to attack Russia? Well, because he wanted the natural resources that Russia had, but he forgot to think about it being winter and being a huge country in Russia, destroyed all the food. So they didn't have any food, and they were defeated. And, their great general, General Rommel, was pulled out. And then December 1941, Japan attacks Pearl Harbor, which brings America into the war. In June 1940, Allies are victorious at Midway. So we've talked about three generals. So General Rommel, who is also known, his nickname was known as the Desert Fox. And do you remember who he was a general for? Germany. So he was a general for Germany. And then you had Montgomery, General Montgomery, and he was for England. And then you had MacArthur, who of course was for the United States, General Douglas MacArthur. So today we're going to we've talked about the course of the war. We've talked about the principal threats of conflict, the major turning points, and now and then this is actually what we're going to talk about today, and then Europe and Japan. Guiding questions for today. So as I'm teaching, kind of listen and see if you can find the answers to this. This would actually be on the test, but you're not having one, so I hope that you're still learning something, and some of you are when you're doing your points. What were the major turning points of the war, and what events led to the conclusion of the war? And of course, our topic is course of the war, and this is part 2. So, we've already talked about 2 turning points. You remember what turning points are? Like a certain thing is going one way, and all of a sudden something big happens, and then it just switches. Maybe Germany's winning, and all of a sudden something happens and Russia's winning, or the Allies. and the Axis powers. So the major turning points is Germany's invasion of Russia. Now remember, Germany had said, or Hitler had said, they had made a pact that they wouldn't attack, they would not attack Russia for 10 years. He broke his pact. Now, Hitler was not known for his honesty, and so Russia could have said, you know, okay, this is Hitler, they fooled us again. I probably should have stayed on the side like I did on World War I. So they switched teams. When Germany attacked Russia, okay, and then Russia pushed Germany back, now Germany, just like World War I, is fighting a two-front war. You know, people on this side and the people on this side. So now they're stuck in the middle, and they've got to fight both sides. Whereas it was a lot easier when they had their allies with Russia, but now they've messed up again. And then Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor. How could this be a turning point when they've devastated the people in America? Well, this brought America into the war, and when we went in, okay, and we fought in the Pacific, and then we went to Europe, it brought much needed supplies and help. It's kind of like, because they were fighting for so long and they were tired, you know. In 1939, for 3 years, they've been fighting in Europe, these countries, you know, France, and a lot of deaths, and they're starved, and they're running out of ammunition, and they're just, it's kind of like having the relief. The cavalry's coming in and saving them. And so this is what's going to happen with Russia. So if you remember, I want you to look at your map again, because you're going to see how all this is happening. This is Japan's expansion. So just take a look at that, and you'll see how Japan is going and basically just having their own little party and capturing all these little islands in the Pacific. You know, like I said yesterday, Manchuria, Japan, Korea, and they're just, and so someone's going to come in and help eliminate Japan and their bulliness. In comes another general, Dwight D. Eisenhower. And so he is an American general that led a force of 160,000 during the invasion of Sicily. So here's a picture. Oops, I just lost. This is the one thing about when you have an iPad and you have fingers like me, you touch something and then everything goes away, and then you're sitting there trying to search. Okay, so first of all, here's a picture of Italy. Now remember when we talked about yesterday how they wanted to capture Africa because Africa had a way of making it easier to get into Europe. So Eisenhower took his troops and he went in and he went to the northern part of Africa, and you can kind of see what they did. They went in and they went up there and captured Italy. Now, Hitler thought that they would not go through Africa. He thought maybe they would go through a different route. So he underestimated the American army. Well, the American army was able to get into Italy, and in 38 days was able to capture that and take it back. Okay, so Mussolini is defeated here. Then you have all these other countries, and I know I've showed this to you again. I want you to look at this map. I'll hold it up for just a little bit because you can see the major Axis powers and then maximum areas that they control, and then the neutral nations. So, just take a look. I hope it's not blurry, and you can see that what's going on. If you have to pause it, you can too. So you can kind of see this part. Now, one of the major things that happened was the Battle of Normandy. Before I forget, I'm just going to show you this map right here. And you can see where Normandy is. All right. Oops. Okay. And so we have Dwight D. Eisenhower is going to, I'm going to pull up my notes, sorry. Go in there, okay? So this was called D-Day. There's other names for it. They called it Operation Overlord or Operation Neptune, but we know it as D-Day, okay? And they had, those were the code names, but sometimes when you were talking about it, if I was like, hey, Charlie, what are we going to do on, what day is Operation D-Day? You know, you had to be secretive during this one. You did not want to trust people who could be spies or could overhear. So they called like Hot and Seuss and Fairies on the Carpet. Those were some of the secret names that if they talked about fairies on the carpet, no one would understand what that meant. If I said fairies on the carpet, you know, that would not be clear to me, but they had these code names, okay? And so they sent 165,000 troops to do this this operation or do this invasion, okay? And then about 7,000 vessels were provided to transport all these people. And I'm talking about planes and boats and tanks and, you know, parachuting, these paratroopers. So this what had happened, D-Day, it started with American paratroopers jumping behind enemy lines. So on the beaches of Normandy, they're going into France, and what they want to do, because Germany has captured France. Remember, we learned that yesterday. And Americans, or not the Americans, but the Allies are going to help the French people and help liberate them. So they're getting help also from Britain, and they're also Americans are getting help from Britain and from France. Dwight Eisenhower is the leader of the Allied armies. So not only is he the leader of the American army, but all the Allied forces together. He's working with Montgomery, and they're planning this attack. Okay, so it started with American paratroopers jumping behind enemy lines, and their mission was to cut communication, secure the bridges, create confusion, and then make way for the other men to come, and the main assault that would take place a few hours later. So a lot of people died. So because when they're coming in, the paratroops are coming in, they're an open target. So these Germans are shooting them one by one, boom, 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 boom. And a lot of them were injured. A lot of them were killed. Some didn't land where they were supposed to, because if it was windy, you can't really always, you know, you land somewhere else. They could have been captured. However, they did accomplish the mission. So God bless the men that risked their lives to do this, for not only, you know, not only for America, but for France. Remember what I said, for evil to multiply, I'm not saying the quote right, but it takes a good man not to say anything. And this is what the Allies are doing. They're trying to help these people in France. General Rommel. So what happened is Hitler, they didn't think that the Allies were going to do something like this. It was secretive, right? And so Rommel, who was the leader of the German army, he went home for a while because he was celebrating his birthday. So he wasn't even there. Hitler didn't think that it was important, that he didn't have to worry about it. He thought something would be different, because if you go back to the map, let me go back to my map that I just showed you. Okay, see, if you go back to the map where Normandy is, and I want you to look at Great Britain and look at France and see that there's a little, look at the ocean. There's another section in there that Hitler thought that they would cross because it was smaller. In fact, if you look at that map that I just showed you, it's almost like you can run and jump, and not really, but he didn't think that they would come a further route. And so that was one of the things that happened on that day. So, General Rommel, like I said, known as the Desert Fox, went home to celebrate his birthday. And the one thing about D-Day, this was the largest amphibious attack on the northern coast of France. There was approximately 4,000 people who died on this day, risked their lives, but when they landed on the beaches, the Americans landed on the beaches of Omaha and Utah. These were the code names. Don't think that that's exactly what their names were. And they were American code names for the beaches. And then the British, who was also part of this D-Day attack, they landed on the beaches of Juno, Gold, and Sword. All right, and then you had some Canadians helping too. So this, of course, when you're seeing all these people coming and landing, and the Germans were a little confused at what's going on. They fought hard, and they fought hard, and they killed a lot of our men. Like I said, 4,000 people died in this attack, but they were able to secure. So D-Day happened on June 6, 1941. No, not 1944, sorry. June 6, 1944. It was supposed to happen on June 5th, but the weather was so bad, and they were afraid that the planes would be destroyed, and so they ended up doing it the next day. They were able to secure the beaches on June 11th, and then started to move towards Germany. Like, the losses were heavy. A lot of people risked their lives, gave their lives to help other people. And I know, like in France, when a person died, an American soldier died in France or across sea, back then, America didn't have enough money to send the bodies back to the families because there were so many people. So a lot of those men had to be buried wherever they died. And I know there's a place in France where they buried a lot of these American soldiers out of respect. I've never been there. I'm pretty sure that that Corbin has, and it would be a remarkable place, but they buried our soldiers there, which was really nice. And you know, it's kind of amazing how God works in wonderful ways. It was the French people who helped the Americans during the Revolutionary War. They helped us win victory over Britain, and we have a country because of their help. Of course, it was all God. And then now this is a way for America to repay the French for what they did, because we never did give them back their money, you know. And so Thomas Jefferson wasn't great about that. So this was the huge, huge turning point of the war, and it started the beginning of the end of the war that you're going to see. Germany is going to finally give up. The Allies reclaimed Paris in August of 1944, so France escapes the the control of the Germany. They liberated the people from Nazi rule, and so now they just need to end this war. Another battle that was taking place during this time, and I'm going to show you a picture. Oh, I was going to show you some pictures of, so I didn't read you the definition of D-Day, but D-Day is the day when the Allies launched a massive invasion on France along a 50-mile front on 5 beaches, and I already told you the name of the 5 beaches, and that happened on June 6, 1944. So here are some pictures. These might be in your book, but I'm going to just show you some pictures. And I put another, those little videos that I watch I put on there. Hopefully you're watching those. I'm sure you have plenty of time to do it, but here are some more pictures of people who. So by December 1944, the Allies in the West had reached the border of Germany. Hitler ordered a final push in order to break through a lightly protected section of the Allied lines, and this was called the Battle of the Bulge. Okay, this is Hitler's failed attempt to break through a lightly protected section of the Allied lines. So this is a picture or a map of where the Battle of the Bulge is taking place. You know, a bulge they're trying to push it in. All right, so let me pull up my notes again. All right, so this took place in southern Belgium, in a forest in Luxembourg. Germany's troops pushed the Allies back, kind of like that circle, like a bulge right there. The 101 1st Airborne Division held their position inside the bulge, even in cold weather and very low supplies. They held it until they were relieved and the Allies could take position too. So they just fought hard. They knew that the war was over. Germany was tired, and I think they all just wanted this to end. So many lives were killed during this time, and for actually that it didn't have to. World War I was supposed to be the war that ended all wars, but of course with our sinful nature, that's not always the case. This battle of the Bulge, was important because it showed that the Allies were unstoppable. 10 months after that date, Germany was on the verge of collapsing, and at this time, Mussolini was shot by his own people on April the 28th. Hitler, facing the destruction of Germany and a Russian invasion, committed suicide in his bunker. He went and he had signed. One of the things he also did before he died is that Rommel was convicted or accused of trying to get rid of Hitler. He didn't like a lot of what Hitler asked them to do. He thought that some of the decisions he made was hurting the German army. So Rommel was either going to have to go, he was hurt, so he either had to go to prison or face trial, which trial in Germany is, not fair at all, or commit suicide. And he chose the latter. He chose to commit suicide, so he died of cyanide poison. He just went and said goodbye to his family and took the pill. Nice leader, right, Hitler? Well, Hitler goes to this bunker and he's going to do the same thing. And I read a book on him. When he tested it out, he gave it to his dog to see if the cyanide poison would be strong enough. And of course, his dog dies, and then the people in there with him, his wife and his maid or his servants, people who, they weren't really servants, but they worked with him and they helped him. It was kind of like a butler or whatever. All the people that were there with Hitler committed suicide as well. And so that he died, like I said, on April 30th, 1945. So it's almost the anniversary of that coming up soon. German leaders told the people of Germany that Hitler died in the line of battle. They didn't want people to know that he actually committed suicide. And what a leader. You've led this group of people to fight and you lose, and you commit suicide. Of course, if he was to be captured, he would be on trial for war crimes, and he probably would have lost his life anyway by execution. On April the 12th, though, so let's go back to a few days. We're going to go back now. The war in Europe is almost over. we're going to go back. Actually, it is over. And we're going to go back to Japan. So I was going to show you, yeah. On May 8th, 1945 was the date that the Germans unconditionally surrendered. This is known as VE Day, or the Victory in Europe. So during this time, though, when this is all happening, in America, President Roosevelt dies. He dies of polio and the complications from polio. So Harry Truman, who is the vice president, becomes president. Now, remember, at this time, the German scientists, including Albert Einstein, wrote a letter to Roosevelt saying that the Germans were making an atomic bomb. And it was secretive. It was called the Manhattan Project. No one knew about it. Not even Harry Truman. So think about this. He's vice president of the United States, and he didn't even know about this secretive mission, okay? So he was saying they were giving the Japanese, because we were slowly gaining back a lot of the islands in the Pacific. However, we were still losing a lot of lives at this time. So Harry Truman decides to go to them and ask them to surrender. They're losing anyway, just surrender. And the Japanese officials reject this demand. Okay, and I'm going to tell you something about the Japanese anyway. So they decide to reject the demand. That's the wrong page. So the Manhattan Project, what we're working on to build the atomic bomb, took about 130,000 employees. And it cost about $2 billion. Now that was in 1944, 45. Today's money, it would be about $20 billion to build this atomic bomb. Okay? So I already told you that the Allies have been slowly taking back the islands that the Japanese conquered, but they needed to come up with a different strategy because so many people had died. So the summer of 1945, they gave the Japanese an opportunity to surrender. They refused. And so they decide to drop the first atomic bomb. I'll show you. You have Nagasaki and Hiroshima. It's pronounced so many different ways. Some people say Hiroshima, and I've always been taught it was Hiroshima, but and Nagasaki. So on September the 2nd, 1945, no, that's not. We're not there. I'm going ahead of myself because we're getting to the end of the war. All right. So the summer of 1945. We're not quite here yet. We gave the opportunity for Japan to surrender. They didn't surrender, so we dropped the first atomic bomb. Enola Gay, it was the name of the plane that dropped the atomic bomb. They had names. They were called Fat Man and Little Boy. Dropped the first one, and 125,000 to 200,000 deaths happened from the first atomic bomb when it was dropped on Hiroshima, because it was not only being killed that way, but people died of radiation poisoning and stuff, and a lot of civilians had to die for this. And then they were stubborn. They still refused to surrender, and so a couple days later, they dropped the other atomic bomb on Nagasaki, and about 40,000 more people died from that bombing alone. You ask, why did the Japanese, after the first bombing, why were they so convinced to keep on and not surrender? Well, if you go back to, if you remember from ancient Japan, what we studied, the Japanese believed that they came from the gods. that they, you know, the first Japanese people, so they were descendants of the gods. The emperors were worshipped as a god. So they thought they were superior to all other people. They were better. Kind of like Hitler thought too, but they really believed it. I'm not saying that Hitler didn't believe it, but this was something that they were taught. And so how in the world, we're better than them, how in the world are we going to surrender to those people? That's basically how they thought. But knowing that a lot of people lost their lives because of them was one thing. So September the 2nd, 1945 was the date the Japanese and Allied representatives signed the documents that ended the fight. And they signed it on the USS Missouri, right there, and which is located in Hawaii. I think it's ironic how Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor and it was just like full circle. That's where we got into the war, and then we ended the war in Pearl Harbor again. So going to the key events, I've already said some of the key events earlier, but now these are things that I want you to remember. So we had June 1942, Allies were victorious at Midway. July 1942, Allies invaded Sicily. September 3rd, 1943, Italy surrendered to Allies. June 6, 1944, Allies invaded Normandy. August 25th, 1944, Paris is liberated. December 16th, 1944 is the Battle of the Bulge. April 12th, 1945, President Roosevelt dies. April 30th, 1945, Hitler commits suicide. May 8th, 1945, Germany surrenders to the Allies. And August 6th and 9th, atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan. And September the 2nd, 1945, Japan surrenders. Some review questions for today. In what European country in 1940 did the Allies find themselves surrounded by German forces? This was in France at the Battle of Dunkirk. What prevented a German victory over the Soviet Union? Continued Russian resistance and the Russian winter. What general traveled to North Africa to rescue Italian forces and push back British? Rommel. What battle became Germany's final attempt to break through the Allied lines? The Battle of the Bulge. So that's your lesson today. It's a little bit longer than most lessons. I hope you enjoyed it. Tomorrow we're going to be talking about the conclusions, not the conclusions, but the consequences of the war. There's always consequences, and now we have to rebuild our countries again. I love you all. I hope you have a great day, and I hope you make good choices.